What's up everyone, Alex here. The day that I didn't think was gonna come has finally arrived, in that I finally have 50,000 subscribers, and it only took me 7 years to get there. Now, I'm not bitter. I'm really happy that I actually got to this milestone, even though there's a possibility that I'm gonna be 52 years old when I hit 100,000 subscribers. But thank you so much for supporting the channel, watching any of my videos, joining my Patreon at patreon.com/backlogbattle, becoming a YouTube member, and just outright doing the best you can to be around and interacting with our community. When I started this channel, I wanted an alternative to all of the other kind of media things that were coming out. Like, I think there was a lot of negativity coming out in video games at the time, and there's too much positivity. And I thought to myself that there's a way to balance it out without making things all poopy and stuff. So thank you very much for doing this with me, and of course joining me on this journey. So for this video, kind of like my gaming in my 40s video, I kind of thought like we can have a conversation, and I asked you guys to post like a lot of questions actually on 2 of my community tab posts, and they're 2 because I want to make sure that people didn't miss the fact that I want some questions to answer. And I have to be honest, this is the second time I've recorded this video, because the first time I tried to read some of your comments, but it literally took about 2 hours to get through, and I just wanted to like really nail this down and limit it to the questions that you're asking me, and I want to answer your questions because I don't get to do this all the time. Sometimes like I actually do a lot more of the asking, and so I'm really excited to do this for you right here and now. So let's just get started. This first question is by Kohiek, and they write, what is your most replayed game? They say like most replayable, but that's kind of like, you know, subjective. I feel like, you know, like, do I replay games that are replayable and stuff? Like shooters are very replayable. But to that question, my answer has to be 2 games actually, and that is Persona 4 and Castlevania Symphony of the Night. I love these 2 games. Like, if I ever want to experience the beauty of pixel art in general, like, I think you can't go wrong with Castlevania Symphony of the Night. My friend Cookie on Twitter is actually playing through it, and she has her own frustrations for it, but I just love following her reactions and responses to this game. And quite honestly, like, I just got gifted a key to play the Castlevania collection, the DS collection, and Dawn of Sorrow, as much as like it doesn't have like I forgot the artist's name. It doesn't have her artwork. I still really love it because it's just so kooky. And, you know, like at the time, like I just wanted to play more Metroidvanias. And of course, Persona 4, because for me, like that game has a special place in my heart. It brought me back to JRPGs, and I know that this might not be popular for some people, and maybe I could be accused of overthinking, but I think it's important to note that every single piece of media, whether you find it artistic or not, is open to personal interpretation. And Persona 4 for me, because of its identity, you know, kind of conversation and topic and subject matter, it had a lot to do with talking about gender identity and sexuality as well, thanks to Naoto and Kanji. And so that really made me question a lot of that was really important to, you know, to kind of make me grow as an individual. So that's the only thing I'll say about that, but I hope like you share your own thoughts about all of the stuff that I'm going to be sharing today as well, because I think it'll be fun. I just have a feeling it's going to be really fun. Anyways, next question is by Bowflex2480, and they write, do you think we'll ever see Yor from Spy X Family in Street Fighter 6? They did that crossover promotional video a while back, and now I want her in. I'm just going to say it outright. No, I don't think so. A lot of IP and brands are very protective of their, you know, intellectual property, and the closest we'll ever get to Yor actually being in Street Fighter 6 is through the costume that I think Chun-Li wears, and I think there was like some other costumes and stuff. There's no way we're gonna see Anya fighting anybody, because that's just, you know, she's a little kid, but I don't think so. Sorry. I just don't think so. But it's nice that you're hoping. Our next one is from P-Town 1979, and they write, "Who are your favorite video game characters of all time?" This is a really good question. This is something that I pondered quite a bit. And I have to say that I have more affinity towards characters from the 8-bit era of games. So we're talking about like Mario, we're talking about Link, and of course Zelda. We're talking about Mega Man, the Belmonts, basically the whole Belmont clan, Dracula, technically, because he's a video game character, everybody in like Punch-Out, you know. And if I think about modern times, like which characters really kind of stand out to me? Well, obviously Persona 4, I did mention it already, but that entire cast, specifically Rise, because I think what's interesting about Rise is she is an idol, if you guys don't know and haven't played the game, and she faces a very interesting challenge compared to everybody else in that entire game. And when I became a bit more successful on YouTube, I started seeing her perspective of how she is having a tough time treating who she is as a person versus who she is as a celebrity. And I am loath to call myself a celebrity, but 50,000 subscribers and hundreds of millions of like, you know, views, likes, comments combined, you know, I'm a public figure. Sue me. So that's obviously one character. Naoto, Kanji, practically like everybody in Persona 4 is like my favorite character in modern times. And I should probably add Shepard from Mass Effect because I was able to create them in my own way and tell their story in my own way. I know that it's kind of limited in terms of like narrative, but I felt very much like I was able to write their story, and that felt really good. I think that felt really good. Habituella Lover asks, what are some of your favorite collector's editions you have? This is actually a really good question, and what's really funny is in the previous recording that I had, I actually forgot to answer this question until the very end, so this is actually in its proper place now. And I have some really cool collector's editions. Obviously behind me, there's Visions of Mana, there's Star Ocean, the Second Story R, and of course, you know, like Octopath Traveler 2, which, you know, it's a great story for that. Like, I might have told this before, Square Enix wanted to send me the care package for Star Ocean, and I was like, cool, you know, like, that's be really cool. And I think I was the one who asked, like, if they had, like, Octopath Traveler 2 collector's editions, because it was already sold out on the store. So they said, like, let me see what I can do. And so when they sent over this, they sent over this too, and Octopath Traveler 2 is my 2023 Game of the Year, which is... oh, like, you want to talk about like somebody who's really hardcore and all, you know, into like old school, like retro pixel style JRPGs, but also like the innovation of, you know, like the modern day, like Octopath 2 is tough to beat in my book. Even this year, I'm like looking at it, at the landscape of, you know, of JRPGs, and I'm like, ooh, that's going to be really tough to beat. Not that we're competing against last year. I'm just saying, like, from the bottom of my heart, that's kind of like how I feel right now. So that being said, there's obviously a whole bunch of other stuff there. I think, you know, Ys 9 Monstrum Nox is there too. I wish I had the money to get Ys 8, but that's when I was like starting my YouTube journey. But I have a few more things here that I want to show you. I have the Arc the Lad collection from Working Designs from back in the day. This is pretty pristine. Like, there's a little bit of dust up here, but like, this is one of my prized possessions. I really like Working Designs and stuff. I also have Lunar Eternal Blue Complete, which is just, you know, they're obviously going to be remastering this like in, you know, like next year and releasing it next year. So I'm really excited to replay through this again with like new voice acting too. Ooh. It hasn't been used a lot because the one that I actually played a lot of is this game, which is Lunar Silver Star Story Complete. If you can see how like dinged up it is, it's because I have tried to play this as many times as possible throughout the years, and I just absolutely adore it. Like, it's really cool because it even like, you know, opens up to this and you can kind of see like some of the cool stuff that you get in there. This is one of my favorites. Now, outside of collector's editions, I do have some rare games that I want to show you. I have Haunting Ground, which I actually did a try play for this game and I changed my voice to a female voice. Let's see if I can tap into that. I think her name is Fiona. I think I need to read something though. I can't just like do this like on call. Okay. What are some of your favorite collector's editions that you have? Is that good? Maybe it's good. I don't know. I'm not I'm listening to myself, but I have bias. Let me know if the female voice is okay. But the bottom line, I have Haunting Ground. It's a really crazy game, very Clock Tower-esque. And then the other one is freaking Rule of Rose by Atlas, as you can tell. I bought both of these games back in 2006 for about $30 each, and I heard they're going for about $100 now, and I am the proud owner of these games. And that was a great question. I really had fun actually just digging into my collection and stuff to find these games. So thank you very much for that wonderful question. The next question is by the Ninja Mouse. If you don't mind me asking, what sort of job or jobs did you have before you became a YouTuber? So between the time that I started back in 2009, for another channel or something like that, and then I kind of disappeared, a year or two after that, and then coming back in 2017, I've always been in the tech industry. I basically went to school in art, but I didn't go into the arts at all. I basically became a web developer because really all they need from you is a bachelor's degree and proof that you can finish something. And then, I went into web development for almost a decade, for actually more than a decade, for 15 years or something like that. And it wasn't until 2017 when I tried to apply for jobs here in Portland when I moved up that it, I just kind of got sick of, how we're being treated in the industry. And unfortunately, much like Twitch, and not to throw them under the bus, their contractors / employees aren't being taken care of well. And I'll get more into that whole Twitch part later. But the bottom line is my wife actually gave me the courage to pursue my dreams of becoming a YouTuber again, because she knows that I'm really talented, and I just have to thank her for that. And there's more to this, of course, but we'll talk about that later when we talk about the story, the YouTube story or whatever, okay? Paul Strength, who actually submitted 3 questions. I never limited anybody to 1 question, so thank you, Paul Strength. His first question is, what were your first games, consoles, and how did it all progress chronologically? I want to say ever since the NES era, I've had at least 1 console for every console generation. That being said, when I think about it, I've had at least 2, right? But as far as my first games go, I told this in my origin story, which is actually a video that you can find on my channel. My grandmother used to own an arcade, and she would prey upon people who were at the local college, looking for something to do. And so she set up an arcade literally about 2 blocks away from the college, and the local government basically shut her down because she was preying upon the college people. But I always thought she was really smart in doing that. But of course, these arcade machines needed to go somewhere. These were cocktail table machines. We're talking about the screens where basically you look down on them and you can put drinks on the table, and they can be 2 players, so sometimes the CRT monitor would flip, depending on who's playing. Really, really cool stuff. I kind of miss that sort of thing. And I grew up with, the Pac-Man games, of course, Galaga, Galaxian, and those games, and, scoring type games. And, that was formative in the way that I kind of grew up with video games, is starting with that and seeing all these wonderful things that I can control on the screen, just kind of react to what I'm doing to them, which is really fantastic. It would take me forever to try to basically say every single console that I've owned up until this point. So I'll just say that I never had a Virtual Boy, I never had a TurboGrafx 16, and I never had a Game Boy Advance Micro, if that even, matters and stuff. So this next question is also by Paul Strength. He asks, which games have impacted you the most? What have you spent the most time on? Well, JRPGs are really formative for me because even when I was young, I had both a Famicom and an NES. I've always been entranced by the beauty and the fantasy that RPGs just kind of delivered, and JRPGs in general, just specifically JRPGs. Like, I remember growing up, I was never really into like games like Baldur's Gate until much later, and even Diablo for that matter. And when I did, I basically discovered the magic behind these games, like why you would play those kinds of games. And I really, truly appreciated my time with those. But I think if we're talking about like impact, I've already mentioned Persona 4. Like, that really impacted me big time. In terms of Souls-likes, Elden Ring was a game changer for me. That was a game that helped me really understand the genre, and I played that game the most out of any other game that I played like in the Souls genre, even like Bloodborne, which happens to be one of my favorites. And let me think, what have you spent the most time on? I mean, Final Fantasy 14, like, I spent so much time on that. It's literal days. I want to say like maybe I've spent 200 days. That's multiplied by 24 to get the number of hours that I've spent in that game over the past 10 years. Oh my gosh, Jack, it's literally 10 years, like a little bit over 10 years to this day that I've been playing Final Fantasy 14. And to me, like, that was a really special time, and it still is. And you know, that was the game that my wife and I played because like we were dating like long distance, so we would always hang out in Final Fantasy 14 and do things together. So that was really impactful in my life as well. But yeah, like, there are so many, you know, like, I need some specifics as to how it impacted me in order for me to properly answer this, unfortunately, because there's just a lot. Like, I want to ask you then, like, what games have impacted you? And not just like from a gameplay perspective, but also from your personality, if it changed you or made you question things, because I think like the best media make you question those things and allow you to be more introspective, right? And I think, you know, from time to time, we do encounter those things in our lives, and I think we should treasure them. But my answer is there's a lot. Please be more specific. Okay, this next question is by Michaela Criscione 3834, and they ask, do you have any favorite video/channel moments that immediately stand out in your memory? I have a lot. I want to start from the very beginning because when I started, I was very experimental. I tried everything under the sun. This channel used to be a repository for my old Backlog Battle podcast, which really evolved over time, and I'll get to that shortly. But I also did like things like bits, which are basically like news bits that I would talk about like less than 5 minutes and stuff. But this is before TikTok, of course. I also have something called Try Play, which I literally just like play the first hour of the game and just the first hour. Like, how many games have you played for an hour and you expected to get into the gameplay, but it's still playing the cutscene? Like, this is that kind of, you know, news content or video content, excuse me, that kind of shows you like, hey, this is what you can expect from the first hour. You know, have fun. A lot of us are okay with the slow starts in JRPGs, but there is also a good number of us who just don't want our time wasted because we only have like an hour an evening to play. And that's why I made Try Play. There was also a concept for a video that I did execute. I made 3 videos from it called Travel Eorzea, which is basically a travel log / interview where I interview people who are citizens of Eorzea in Final Fantasy XIV. Now, I really love this idea because it is an interview kind of, you know, video mixed with lore. And I really love this, and I wish like there's a way that I can bring this back in some capacity. And it's really cool because you get to hear somebody's opinion on a game in a very different way, like a very specific area. Like, think about, you know, like when you ask somebody their opinions and the feelings that they felt when they first emerged into Hyrule at the beginning of Breath of the Wild. Like, that's a magical experience, right? And being able to ask somebody and have them share that experience with everybody else felt so good. And I started that with like Final Fantasy XIV because, you know, technically everybody who plays the game is a citizen of the game. And so I devised this idea. I interviewed 3 of my friends, and they shared, you know, some really, you know, touching moments in Final Fantasy XIV, memories and stuff that they will cherish forever. And I just want to thank them for sharing that. Aside from that, being able to, be invited to try out Final Fantasy VII Rebirth at the beginning of this year. They call it the experience, but we all know what that's all about. Being invited to watch Distant Worlds Final Fantasy in Seattle a few months ago. Meeting one of my content creator friends in David Vink and just realizing how genuinely awesome and charming and sweet person he is in real life, and how if we actually lived in the same city, in the same state, we'd probably hang out a lot more because he's that cool of a person. And, we vibe in terms of how good of a friendship we are. We've been really good friends for 2 years. And I have to say, David, if you're watching this, I consider you my best friend. You've been with me through thick and thin on YouTube and out. Really appreciate you, buddy. There's also talking with my fellow content creators on the Backlog Battle podcast. Before that, it used to be just a regular news/review podcast, and I was bad and negative during those times. And I'm not ashamed of that because I grew from, being that negative person to somebody who just genuinely loves games. And it's almost as though I managed to rekindle those memories when I was young of just absolutely loving games genuinely. And I couldn't have gotten here without going through that part of my life. And so I'm thankful of that. Never gonna do it again. But being able to talk to content creators like Iseki Nut, Lady Pelvic, Food for Dogs, that was such a great experience that the only thing that stopped me from doing it anymore is, just the time. I'm reviewing so many games now, but maybe from time to time, I may revisit this idea. Never say never. And of course, the biggest deal for me is being able to interview the father of Final Fantasy, Hironobu Sakaguchi, for Fantasian. Now, I've interviewed a lot of people, including Naoki Yamaguchi, who of course directed Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and Remake, and I am grateful for that opportunity. But the Gooch is amazing. I never thought in my 45 years or 40 years, and when this happened, that I would ever talk to the man who made one of my favorite JRPGs of all time. And I was also pretty generous too, because I didn't just interview him based off of my interests. Mikaya, who is one of the community members here, a longtime community member, their question, was asked during that interview, and, their comments relayed. And I always love doing that. I always love, allowing you to ask your questions to these creators, because there is this gap between the creator and you, the audience member. And I've always wanted to shrink that gap so that way there is this communication, this almost direct communication between you two. So if I ever do an interview, keep an eye out for it on the community tab, because I might ask you some questions to post on there. I've done it before. It's not going to be the last time that I'll do it again. But that's a great question, Michaela. I really appreciate it. So this next question is by Finbar BTN. If you weren't so JRPG focused on your channel, what other things would you typically like to cover? What other hobbies do you think you would like to cover if your channel became content agnostic? Well, yes, I cover a lot of JRPGs, but I'd like to think that I try my best to also cover a lot of indie and niche titles and the larger RPG genre as a whole. Now, granted, the interests of JRPG fans and RPGs don't always intersect, and I acknowledge that, but I'll never stop experimenting to try to see what games you might like. This is how it led us to Chained Echoes. This is how it led us to other games like Zenki Zero Last Beginning, and heck, one of my most popular videos on the channel is freaking Disco Elysium Director's Cut. I mean, that is as far away from a JRPG as you could possibly have, and yet it got I want to say at least 500,000 views on it. It's pretty amazing when I think about it. And so, to me, part of my YouTube journey is also pushing the boundaries of your comfort level as, a gamer. Because when I think about the larger gaming space as a whole, and you boil it down to why I like certain things, it's not necessarily the art style. It's not necessarily the story. It's usually a combination of one or two or three or more of these things. And you can find that in other genres as well. And I think that's really important to discover. The problem is not having enough money to do so. So I try my best to convey the games as best I can, its best and worst qualities. And, to try to just revel in just the celebration of games. Because as many people would like you to think that games are in this really bad place, which there are parts of it in a really bad place, we have to remember that games are here to entertain us. They are there for that purpose. And that's why I'm still doing this channel. I'm still updating this channel. I'm still uploading videos to this channel, and why I love doing so. I love video editing and script writing and making thumbnails, the whole shebang. This is the perfect job for me. I get to basically do almost everything that is creative except for contracts. That's never fun. Contracts are never fun, but it is what it is. However, to your question, I love movies. I need to watch more movies. I am a huge movie buff. If I got more money from YouTube and, and patreon.com/backlogbattle, I would love it to be able to see more movies, because some of my favorite movies are very, very niche, like Helvetica, which is a documentary about the freaking font, for crying out loud. I love the MCU comic stuff, more so MCU and Marvel and DC than anything else, really, the whole film side of it. I used to be a comic buff, but not anymore. Board games, they're really expensive. They're $60 to $90. They're even more expensive than video games at this point. And highlighting cool places in Portland Metro. So I live in Portland, Oregon, and I love just the vibe of this city. And, right now it's a little bit overcast. I just love that feeling of overcast. There was one time that I wanted to film my reviews outside, I'm walking and stuff, and I'm but I work during the hours that my friends work, unfortunately. So, it's tough to do that. Maybe I should invest in a selfie stick. Or something like that. But, let's not get into the weeds here, because we have a few more questions to answer. But thank you very much for that question. The next question is by Nelly BTV. As a maturing gamer, when do you find yourself gaming during the day? Is it in the morning, afternoon, or late at night? Very good question. I play whenever the hell I want. And to support that answer, the next question is, do you do this full time, or is it a side thing? This was asked by T-Deck Wizard, which I would imagine that's Tech Deck Wizard or something like that. And the answer is yes, this is my full-time job. It's both my choice and not. And as I said earlier, the job market is just terrible, with a lot of terrible bosses out there. It's almost like finding the right job is similar to the percentage that you get for finding a really good date if you're out in the dating world, which is to say very slim and very geographically limited, right? And so I decided to do this full time because my wife supported me, and she didn't have to do too much cajoling, but she knew my talent as a content creator. And we'll get to the rest of the details in a little bit, because this third question that Paul Strength asked is, how did you get started on YouTube? And along the same lines, We Unabomber asks, do I have any tips for smaller channels? I think the best tip that I can give you is through my story. So I started creating things way back in 2000. I started writing reviews for many sites under various pseudonyms. And, I just felt like I had a knack for talking about video games. And so in 2009, I created a YouTube channel, one of the first group YouTube channels that are for gaming, by the way. And we all reviewed video games together. We would sit down on a couch, we'd talk about the games that we're playing, they'd ask questions. It was literally Kind of Funny before Kind of Funny was around. But of course, we were so lo-fi. We even tried Justin TV, but it didn't work out. Justin TV, by the way, is Twitch TV now. And it was so, way ahead of its time. And it didn't work out. There was a lot of drama in the group. There were people taking advantage and stealing keys, which was really freaking crazy. And so essentially, I just kind of stuck to podcasting. And so over 10 years, I kept podcasting, refining the way that I talk, which is why I talk like this. And you can't buy this sort of, kind of presentation or even the way that I speak. It's literally honed across 10 years of podcasting. And keep in mind, I did this for 10 years, even though I only had 30 people listening to the podcast, right? And so finally, like I said to myself, I'm going to try streaming because Twitch TV was, popular back in 2013. And so I started streaming. That's when I met my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time. And at the time, I remember around 2013, 2014, my concurrents were really high. We're talking like, I remember streaming Tales from the Borderlands and 100 people were there just watching me play this game and crack jokes and everything. I remember like there was like an Outlast like stream that I did. I don't know if it's like 2013 or 2014. And I just made people laugh because that was the first time I've ever played the game. And I was barely terrified. I was just making jokes about how one of the, characters in the game didn't have like a fully developed crotch and all that stuff. And I just had a blast. But the thing that my wife at the time, well, my wife, my wife at the time, I didn't have multiple wives. I've only had one wife. And I talked about when we started dating was that Twitch was not sustainable. And this is something that I want you guys to hear because my friend Smokoloke, who is still streaming, heaven bless him, when he took a weekend vacation from Twitch, and mind you, this is his primary source of income, he literally lost thousands of dollars to the point where, he couldn't pay rent. And up until this day, like 10 years later, Twitch does not have a really good solution to sustain people and help them actually take breaks. Some people actually like do this for a hobby now. A lot of friends of mine who have practically like quit Twitch because, the grind is very soul sucking. And so that was the time when I basically said, you know what? I'm going to be a YouTuber because unlike Twitch, I can literally schedule something to come out at any time and my fans will appreciate it because I put a lot of thought, effort, and love into this one video and it can be as perfect as I want it to be or close to it. So that's why I moved to YouTube. And it's been a blast. Like I literally edited videos for the first 3 years on a 2009 MacBook Air with, oh God, like I want to say like 4 to 8 gigs of RAM on iMovie, and iMovie was actually super powerful back then. Nowadays it's kind of like gimped a bit, but I loved it. It would take me literally like 5 hours to render like a 10-minute video, but I would just leave it and do my own thing, which was like perfect. Obviously, like as technology gets better, the more things that I can do whiz bang on it and stuff. So it takes a little bit longer in a different way. But that's pretty much how I started. I didn't even like care about like getting like the best equipment, like, on Twitch, by the way, like I didn't try to get the best equipment. I literally just streamed from my PS4 and people still loved it, and goes to show that you don't need the most expensive items to convey what you need. So going back to We Unabomber's question of what kind of tips I can give smaller channels, I think that is start small. And I think the best thing that I can add to this is be yourself and try to take a personal inventory of who you are as an individual to try to see like how you yourself can offer something unique to the table that nobody else can. Because I think the most important thing to think about when it comes to content creation is people go and watch your videos because of you. So if you try to fake it, right? If you try to be negative or controversial, you got to understand that if you get known that way, you're going to be like that for life. There is no pivoting from that. And the reason why I say that is because I think about Stephanie Sterling and how they started, being very critical of the industry and how they lament from time to time that they wished like that there was some latitude with how they present themselves. And they kind of put themselves and pinned themselves in a corner by just being the negative person who's critical and, angry about everything. And so thinking about like where you want to be, how you want to be known, and not from a fame standpoint, but from like a personal standpoint, is very key to getting to where you are. Also, I'm afraid to say this, but consistency. You do have to put out videos consistently because you are a channel. I know that a lot of people say, oh, you can just release things here and there. That's for them. It doesn't work for everybody. Heck, this tip might not even work for you. So, which is why it is extremely important to basically ask yourself, how you want your channel to be. I think that's really the most important thing. You can literally pay hundreds of dollars for people to tell you what you should do. And in fact, a lot of those people will tell you that gaming is a very difficult niche. But here I am with 50,000 subscribers, literally 7 years later, which, by the way, there are going to be haters. Paul Strike said that they were my fan very early on, like when I was only like 500 to 1,000 subscribers. I remember during that time, I had all of these really grand ideas that you're seeing now about my channel. And I was sharing all these ideas to one person for free because ideas are free. You know, I don't believe that you can copy exactly what I'm doing because there's still a lot of ideas in my brain. And I remember that person laughing at me because I didn't even have like 1,000, or even hundreds of thousands of subscribers on YouTube. Well, bro, joke's on you because I'm at 50,000 and potentially 100,000 on my way to the silver play button. And please, if this is your first time watching this channel or you're sharing this with your friend, please share it with your friends. Please, I want to get to 100,000 before I hit 52 years old. That's another 7 years. So please, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. If you've enjoyed any of my videos, please consider subscribing to my Patreon at patreon.com/backlogbattle. It's $5 a month. That's $60 a year. $5 a month. You get early access to all my reviews and videos, plus your name on the end of every video that you're subscribed in. And you would be helping me out tremendously. Right now, admittedly, we're having like some financial problems, and this is my only source of income. And anything that you can offer us would be great. I have a PayPal thing right there on my channel. Any sort of thing you can offer me would be awesome. But anyways, I don't want to beg. I don't like begging. So that's the last time you're going to hear me beg for a while until it's needed. But thank you very much for watching me, everyone. Please share with me what you think of this video. And if you want to answer any of the questions that I got asked as well, because I'm really curious what you have to say about a lot of this stuff, because it's, we don't get asked questions a lot. And I hope that this could be a springboard to something really fun. So thank you very much for watching, everyone, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.